The air didn't just crackle, it hummed. It was a sick, low-frequency thrum that Kale felt in his teeth, in his bones. It was a sound of 20 blades of focused, superheated energy extending from the gauntlet of thing in front of him. Kale's brain was screaming. Every nerve, every cell, every scrap of human sense told him to run. He was a porter, a soft skin. He hauled cargo. He didn't fight gods. And the thing in front of him was as close to a god as this station held. It was 8 feet tall, maybe 9. Its armor wasn't metal. It was some kind of midnight black, chitinous material that seemed to drink the station's artificial light. Ritualistic, glowing red sigils crawled across its surface. Symbols Kale didn't, and never wanted to, understand. This was a purifier, an executioner. Kale was terrified. His hands, slick with cold sweat, were shaking so hard he could barely keep them spread wide. He was a terrible shield. Just a man in a simple, gray porter's jumpsuit, already stained with grime and now, he realized, damp with his own fear. But behind him, pressed against the back of his legs, was the reason he was going to die. The Corvash child was small, barely up to Kale's waist. It wasn't crying. It wasn't screaming. It was just trembling, a constant, low-level vibration of pure, unadulterated terror. The executioner hadn't even looked at Kale. Not really. It didn't register him as a threat or even an obstacle. It simply paused. Its head, a helmet of overlapping black plates, tilted just a fraction. It was calculating, processing. This wasn't anger. This wasn't passion. This was a procedure. And that, somehow, was the most terrifying part. What do you even call this? A ritual? A sacrifice? It was happening in a public plaza, but there was no crowd, no one to help. Just Kale, a line in his human soul, a line he didn't even know existed until this second had been crossed. He couldn't run. He wouldn't run. What would you have done? He could feel the heat from the 20 blades, 10 centimeters from his chest. They shimmered like a heat haze, blurring the dark armor behind them. No! The scream ripped out of Kale's throat, raw and hopeless. It wasn't a war cry. It was a plea. The executioner didn't flinch. It didn't acknowledge the sound. It simply struck. Kale's world didn't just go dark. It imploded in a universe of white-hot, agonizing light. The sound of the blades, the hum of the station, his own scream. It was all consumed by a singular, blinding pain that seemed to tear his very atoms apart. Then silence, blackness. But that, of course, hadn't happened yet. 3 days earlier, Kale was just a ghost. And a ghost, he knew, had no business trying to be solid. He was hauling a repulsor cart of high-grade nutrient packs through the grand concourse of Starbound HFY. The air was thick with the ozone tang of Corvash armor and the sound of their guttural language, a noise like rocks grinding together. They were everywhere, 8-foot-tall mountains of muscle and chitinous plate, their energy halberds slung over their backs. They were the owners, the warriors, the gods, and Kale was the microbe. He kept his head down, his path tight to the wall. His job wasn't to be seen. His job was to not be seen. A roar of what passed for laughter erupted to his left. A Corvash warrior, deep in a story with its broodmate, took a half-step back, not even looking. Its armored heel slammed into Kale's cart. The cart spun, one of the repulsors whining in protest. The nutrient packs toppled. One split open, vomiting a thick gray, ammonia-stinking paste across the polished floor. Kale froze. His heart hammered. The warrior did stop. It turned, slowly. It didn't look at Kale. It looked down. It stared at the gray paste now soiling its boot. Soft-skinned filth. The warrior growled, the words vibrating through the floor. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a statement, like saying the sky is black. It didn't hit Kale. It didn't threaten him. It just walked on, leaving Kale on his hands and knees in a puddle of stinking nutrient paste, with the station's traffic parting around him like water around a stone. This was Kale's wound, not violence, just complete, soul-crushing invisibility. He was just part of the station's background noise, less than a person, less than cargo. He was cleaning up the mess, his jaw tight, his face burning with shame so familiar it was almost comfortable, when his datapad chimed. Priority alert. Biolab 7. Containment manifold. Urgent. Kale's eyes flicked up. Biolab 7 was in the Gamma Sector. The entire Gamma Sector was on high alert, locked down by Purifier patrols. A soft skin like him wouldn't get through the main checkpoint for hours. A slow, secret smile touched Kale's lips. He abandoned the cart. He slipped into a narrow alcove, one that looked like a simple circuit junction. To a warrior, it was just a wall. To Kale, it was a doorway. He popped the pressure seal panel. The air that hit him was hot, oily, and thick with the smell of ozone. He slipped inside. This was his world. The warriors owned the halls. Kale owned the walls. He moved with a porter's silent, practiced competence. He shimmied between massive power conduits that thrummed with enough energy to atomize him. He ducked under whining plasma feeds, climbed a ladder that hadn't seen a boot print in a decade, and crawled through a ventilation shaft wide enough to fly a drone through. He knew every shortcut, every hidden path, every forgotten crawl space. He was the ghost in the machine. He arrived at Biolab 7 in 6 minutes, a journey that would have taken a warrior an hour. The scientist, a frantic-looking Solarian, snatched the manifold from his hand. Gods, Kale, you saved us. Purifier patrol's heavy, Kale said, catching his breath. They're not just heavy, they're agitated, the scientist muttered, already installing the part. The purge protocols are failing. They say the taint is adapting. The taint? Kale asked. The scientist froze, realizing he'd spoken aloud. Nothing. Just sensor ghosts. Get out of here. Kale slipped back into the walls, the word echoing in his mind. Taint. He was just a ghost, living in the cracks of the station. But he had to wonder, what did the cracks see that the giants in the halls missed? It was supposed to be a simple haul, a bio-waste run to the decommissioning sector. The kind of job Kale loved, because no self-respecting Corvash warrior would ever set foot in the recycling tunnels. He was a ghost in his element, pushing his cart through a section of the station that had been superseded a decade ago. This was his favorite shortcut, a little-used plaza, open to the station's grand observation port. It was always silent, always empty, until today. Today it was not empty. Kale's blood didn't just run cold. It evaporated. He'd heard the voice before he saw them, that deep, grinding gutter language. But this wasn't the boisterous roar of warriors in the mess hall. This was low, cold, and liturgical. It was the sound of a judge passing a sentence. Kale pressed himself into the shadow of a bulkhead, his heart hammering a sick rhythm against his ribs. There were two. One was the Purifier, the same midnight black armor, the same terrifying, faceless helm that haunted his nightmares. It was a monolith of absolute, unfeeling authority. The other was small, a Corvash child. It couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old by human standards. It was on its knees, its small, clawed hands resting on its legs. And it was this that broke Kale's brain. The child wasn't crying. It wasn't begging. It wasn't showing any of the terror that Kale himself was drowning in. It was just watching the Purifier. As Kale watched, his own fear held him in place. The child, Zyla, lifted her head. She looked at the giant, terrifying warrior judge, and her expression wasn't fear. It was understanding. A strange, profound, and heartbreakingly sad understanding. You carry the taint, child of Rak. The Purifier's voice amp rumbled, devoid of all emotion. Kale's breath hitched. Taint. The same word the Solarian scientist had used. The sensor ghosts. The adapting. This was what they were hunting. Not a program. Not a ghost in the machine. A child. The Purifier raised a gauntlet, not the one with the blades, but a different one. A scanner. It projected a sickly, flickering red light over Zyla, a light that made Kale's skin crawl. The taint is confirmed, the Purifier intoned. By the authority of the High Council and in the name of the First Blood, I sentence you to the Honor Cull. Honor Cull. The term was new. It was brutal. And it was final. Kale was just a porter. A soft skin. He was a ghost. And ghosts don't interfere. This was a core Vash matter. Their laws, their monsters. What would you even do? Be a hero? A human hero? To an 8-foot-tall angel of death? He should have run. He should have backed away into the maintenance tunnels and forgotten this. But he couldn't move. He was frozen, transfixed by the impossible calm of the child. The purifier's gauntlet changed. The scanner retracted, and Cale heard it. That sound, the low, sick thrum that he'd only heard once before in the white-hot flash of his mind. The purifier's other hand. 20 blades of shimmering, superheated energy extended from the dark gauntlet, casting a terrible, glowing light over the plaza. Cale's brain screamed run. His feet, pushed by a force older and deeper than fear, didn't. The sound, that thrum, it vibrated in Cale's teeth, a high-frequency whine that signaled the end of everything. The 20 blades of light on the purifier's gauntlet burned with an awful, beautiful intensity, casting the small plaza in a strobing, deadly white light. Cale's brain was a screaming symphony of NO. Run, you idiot! Ghost! Ghost! Get in the walls. You are a ghost. You are not real. You are not here. 1,000 years of human evolution screamed at him to survive, to flee. 1,000 days of soft-skin conditioning on this station reinforced it. You are nothing. Your life is forfeit. Theirs is not. He was just a porter. He was just a microbe. And then the child moved. Zyla, the small, kneeling Corvash, who had been watching her executioner with that terrifying, sad calm, slowly turned her head. Her eyes, large, liquid black, and impossibly deep, moved past the purifier. They found Cale, hidden in the shadows of the bulkhead. The ghost was seen. She didn't beg. She didn't cry for help. She just looked at him. And in that look, Cale saw not just an alien child, but the one thing his invisibility had cost him, a connection. The purifier's arm, holding the gauntlet, tensed. The blade sang, reaching the apex of their power. This was it, the final, fatal downstroke. Run, his brain shrieked. His body, in an act of pure, idiotic, human treason, disobeyed. Cale's datapad clattered from his suddenly limp hand. The handle of his bio-waste cart slipped from his knuckles. He didn't drop his cargo. He shed it. He shed his job, his invisibility, his fear, his future, all in a single, ragged gasp. He didn't make a plan. He didn't rationalize. He just moved. He lunged from the shadows, his porter's boots slipping on the polished stone. He wasn't a warrior. He was a clumsy, desperate, terrified man. The purifier was fast. It registered the movement, a blur of soft-skin filth where there should be nothing. It half-turned, but the execution stroke was already in motion. It was too late to stop. Cale was screaming. It wasn't a word. It wasn't an O. It was just a sound. A raw, primal, human roar of defiance that had no place in this cold, alien plaza. He dived. He didn't try to fight. He didn't try to disarm. He just tried to be. He threw his body, his insignificant, soft-skinned body, between the child and the armory of light. The world dissolved. It wasn't a clean cut. It was a collision. 20 superheated blades of pure energy, designed to sever the soul from a warrior's body, slammed into him. There was no sound, just a white-hot void. The pain was absolute. It was a supernova in his nerves, a feeling so large it vaporized all thought, all identity. He smelled his own suit charring, heard the sizzle as the blades hit flesh and bone, and felt a kinetic impact lift him off his feet and slam him into the bulkhead behind the child. He slid to the floor, his world a kaleidoscope of agony and system shut down. His last, fading, utterly human thought, as the darkness rushed to claim him, was, what a stupid, stupid way to die. And then, black. The first register was nothing. The pain was gone. Cale's last memory was a supernova of agony, a universe of pure, white-hot torment as 20 blades of energy had unmade him. He should be dead. He should be atoms. He wasn't. He was aching. A deep, dull throb from his back, like he'd spent a week hauling reactor cores. He forced his eyelids open. They felt heavy, glued shut. The light was a pale, sterile blue, humming from panels in the high ceiling. The air was cold. stinging his nose with a scent of ozone and medicinal-grade stabilizers. He was in a Corvash medical bay. He grunted, pushing himself up onto his elbows. The movement was stiff, but it worked. His back, which had been a charred ruin, pulled tight. He instinctively tried to reach behind him. His fingers didn't find bandages. They found skin, new, smooth, and laced with the hard, ropey lines of perfectly formed scar tissue. He'd been healed. The soft skin filth, the microbe, the ghost, had been given million-credit medical care. The why of that was more terrifying than the blades had been. And that's when he heard the other sound. Not the hum of the biomonitors. Not the whisper of the air scrubbers. A sound he knew. A sound he'd just heard in the plaza. The low, resonant thrum of a dozen active energy halberds. Cale's head snapped up. He was not alone. His heart, which had just started a slow, confused beat, stopped. Then it slammed against his ribs, a frantic bird in a cage that was suddenly too small. The medical bay was full. They lined the walls, silent as a grave. 10 of them. 10 towering, 8-foot-tall mountains of muscle and black ancestral armor. Their helmets were off, revealing the grim, tusked faces of a Corvash warrior clan. And their weapons were lit. The glowing, crescent-shaped blades of their halberds cast a sick, flickering blue light across the room, making shadows dance in the corners. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stared. Cale's breath locked in his throat. This was worse than the Purifier. Far worse. The Purifier was executing a law. This was something else. He looked at their faces. Their mandibles were clamped tight. Their dark, reptilian eyes weren't filled with the usual contempt. Not the simple get-out-of-the-way disdain he was used to. It was disbelief. It was a look a human might give to a rock that had just stood up and started singing. It was a horrifying, world-breaking bafflement. They were staring at him like he was an equation they couldn't solve, a living, breathing paradox. The silence stretched, unbearable, broken only by the thrum of their blades. He was healed. He was surrounded. And he was an impossibility. What happens when a ghost becomes a god? Or a monster? Cale's throat was sandpaper. He tried to speak. What? He croaked. The warrior in the center, a massive, scarred specimen with a broken tusk and eyes as old as the station, took one slow, booming step forward. The sound of his boot on the deck was like a judge's gavel. He stopped, looming over Cale's medical bed, and said nothing. The scarred warrior, Targok, loomed over him. His shadow was a physical weight, pressing Cale into the thin mattress. You bled for the child, Targok finally growled. The voice was like gravel and thunder, a sound that didn't just break the silence but shattered it. Cale flinched. He couldn't find his voice. We softskins. Targok spat the word, his mandibles clicking in disgust. You see with your eyes, not with your blood. You thought you were a hero. You thought you stopped a murder. He laughed. It was a dry, harsh, terrifying sound that held zero humor. You stopped nothing human. Targok leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial rumble. You interrupted a sacred ritual. A ritual of purification. Cale's brain, still sluggish from the medical stabilizers, tried to catch up. Purification? She's a child. She is wrong. Targok's voice suddenly cracked with a fury that made the other 10 warriors grip their halberds tighter. She carries a taint. I don't understand, Cale whispered, his hands pulling the thin sheet up to his chest. She feels. Targok roared, pointing a massive clawed finger at the door as if the child were just outside. She feels pity. She feels empathy. It is a plague, human. The same plague that brought our ancestors to their knees. The weakness that shattered our first empire and turned warriors into whimpering softskins like you. Cale's blood ran cold. The thing that had made him jump. The protect the vulnerable instinct. That was a taint. The Purifier was not a murderer, Targok explained, his voice a low growl once more. He was a healer. He was cleansing the bloodline. The world tilted. The villain was a doctor. The victim was a plague. And Cale was the fool who had just saved the disease. So, you're going to kill me, Kale whispered. It wasn't a question. It was wait, why had they healed him? Targok's face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. He looked at Kale with a hatred so deep it was almost physical. By our current laws, yes, he bellowed. But Targok lifted his massive energy halberd. Kale scrambled backward, pressing himself against the wall. But Targok didn't strike. He slammed the butt of the heavy staff onto the durasteel deck. Boom! The sound was a physical explosion. It hit Kale's chest like a punch, making the biomonitors beside him scream and flatline for a split second. The other warriors flinched. There's a reason we hunt the taint. Targok roared, his voice shaking the very walls. Because it leads to this, to madness, to you. He was breathing heavily, his dark, reptilian eyes locked on Kale's. Our current laws demand your death, he seethed. But the old law, the law of the first blood, forgotten for 10,000 years until you soft-skinned filth, is stronger. The blood price, he bellowed, silencing the shrieking monitors by sheer force of will. It states, a life willingly given for a life marked by the cull claims that life. Targok's armored claw, a thing of steel and scales, jabbed at Kale's chest, stopping an inch from his scarred skin, a vibration with power. The child is now yours, Kale vracked. The alien suffix on his human name sounded like a violation. You are no longer a soft skin. You are, by the old law, clan father to the tainted. Kale wasn't escorted from the medical bay. He was herded. Two massive, armored warriors from Clan Vrak, his clan, a voice in his head whispered with hysterical laughter, flanked him. Their energy halberds were dark, but they carried them at port arms, a silent, constant threat. He wasn't a patient. He was cargo. Again, just a different kind of cargo. They didn't take him to his hovel, in the porter levels. They didn't even take him to a standard brig. They marched him to the Clan Vrak barracks, a section of the station plated in thick ancestral armor, the air heavy with the scent of ozone and oiled metal. The door hissed open not to a cell, but to a suite. By Korvash standards, it was fit for a warlord. Heavy, dark metal furniture. A weapon rack on the wall, empty, he noted. A deep sonic shower alcove. To Kale, it was just a bigger, more expensive cage. Targok was there, standing by a viewport that looked out over the station's docking rings. He didn't turn when Kale entered. You will remain here, Targok growled, his voice a low vibration that Kale felt in his teeth. You will not leave. We will not leave. Kale looked back. The two guards who had brought him stayed. They flanked the inside of the doorway, their massive forms turning the exit into a solid wall of muscle and armor. He was a prisoner with a nicer room. A hiss came from a second door. A smaller warrior, one he hadn't seen before, entered. She wasn't leading the child, Zyla. She was propelling her, a heavy hand on the child's small, armored shoulder. Zyla was shoved into the center of the room and stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the metal table. Then she stood, and, just as she had in the plaza, she looked up. Her eyes found Kale. They were large, black, and knowing. There was no fear in them. Just that same, awful, sad understanding. Kale felt a sudden, bizarre pull from her, a silent hum in the back of his mind. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling. Oh, gods, he thought. The taint. He was feeling her empathy, and she was feeling his terror. They stood there, two impossibilities, watched by a room full of 8-foot killers. Zyla's stomach suddenly let out a loud, pathetic growl. Kale flinched. The sound was so normal, so mundane. It broke the spell. She was just a kid, a hungry kid. He looked at the nearest warrior, a brute with a jagged scar across his mandible. Kale's throat was dry. This was it. His new power. His clan father, status. He had to say something. She's... Kale swallowed. His voice was a pathetic croak. He tried again, forcing his porter's invisible voice to become visible. Can she have some food? It was his first command. The scarred warrior's head snapped toward him, his eyes. Kale had never seen such contempt in his life. It was a physical thing, a wave of pure, unadulterated disgust that made Kale want to shrink, to become a ghost again. The warrior's mandibles clicked. He didn't say, "Yes, clan father." He didn't nod. He reached into a pouch on his belt, pulled out a dense gray nutrient bar, and with a flick of his wrist, shoved it, not at Zyla, onto her. The bar hit the child's chest hard enough to make her grunt and stumble back. It clattered to the deck. The warrior stared at Kale, his eyes daring the soft skin to say another word. Kale's blood ran cold, then hot. He was a master to a clan that despised him. He was a father to a child he couldn't protect. He was trapped. He wasn't a leader. He was a joke. And as he looked at the hardened bar of nutrient paste on the floor, he realized the truth. The purifiers might have been the ones to try and kill him, but it was his own clan that was going to make him wish they had. The silence in the suite was a suffocating, physical thing. The nutrient bar lay on the cold, durasteel deck, a monument to Kale's humiliation. Zyla hadn't moved. She was watching him, her black, empathetic eyes reflecting his own terror. The scarred warrior hadn't moved. His contempt was an armor he wore, his eyes fixed on Kale, daring him to speak again. Kale's heart hammered. He was a master in name, a prisoner in truth, a father who couldn't even feed his child. He was opening his mouth to apologize, to beg, to scream, when the world ended. The sound was a physical blow, a station-wide, ear-splitting war klaxon that Kale had only heard in drills. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was a call to arms. Instinct took over. For the Corvash warriors, that meant action. In a single, fluid motion, all 10 members of Clan Vrak drew their halberds. The hissed thrum of a dozen energy blades igniting at once flooded the room with blue light. They formed a perimeter, not protecting him, but protecting the room. They were warriors. This was what they did. For Kale, instinct meant cowering. He flinched so hard he stumbled back, his hands flying up to cover his ears. He was a ghost, and the light was now on. The klaxon cut off, leaving a ringing, agonizing silence. Then the station-wide vox crackled. A voice that was not a recording. It was cold, pure, and echoed with absolute, zealous authority. Kale had heard it once, during a station-wide address. High Purifier Thrax. To the faithful of Star Bastion Vrak, the voice boomed, seeming to come from the very walls. A heresy has been revealed, a taint in our very heart. Kale's blood turned to ice. A soft-skinned Xeno, a human known as Kale, has blasphemed the old law. He has shielded the tainted. He has given quarter to the plague. He and the child, Xylovrak, are declared heretic and anathema. They are marked for purification on sight. Kale couldn't breathe. A station-wide execution order. But the purifier wasn't finished. By this act, the human has corrupted his protectors. Any who shield a heretic, any who follow the tainted father, are themselves tainted. Clan Vrak, by its own blood oath, is anathema. The broadcast clicked off. The silence that fell now was not contempt. It was murder. The warriors stared at each other. They had just lost everything. Their honor, their station, their purity. They were, in the eyes of their people, unclean. All because of him. Targok, who had been staring at the wall, turned. He turned with a slowness that was more terrifying than any sudden move. His face was a mask of glacial, broken fury. He looked at Kale, not as a clan father, but as a disease that had just rotted his entire clan from the inside out. He took one heavy step, then another. His voice, when it came, was not a roar. It was a whisper, a soft, seething, razor-edge whisper that cut Kale to the bone. The purifiers are coming, clan father. The title was a curse, spat with all the venom in the galaxy. They will be here in moments. They will bring their blades to cleanse their anathema brothers. Targok gestated to the sealed, armored door. Your command. Your command. The words hung in the air, thick and poisoned with sarcasm. Targok's voice was a low growl, an executioner's question. The 10 warriors of Clan Vrak, their energy halberds humming in the blue-lit room, all stared at Kale. Their eyes were pits of contempt. They were waiting. waiting for the soft skin, the anathema father, to give a stupid order, waiting for him to seal their fate. Kale's heart was a drum against his ribs. Command? He was a porter. He hauled cargo. He didn't command 8-foot-tall, death-dealing warriors. He looked at the armored door. Outside, he could hear the distant stomp of heavy boots in the main concourse. The hunt had begun. They expected a tactical plan. A warrior's counterassault. A glorious, doomed charge. His mind was a white-hot static of panic. He had nothing. No, not nothing. His panic-laced adrenaline suddenly hit a different nerve. The part of his brain that had kept him alive and invisible for 10 years. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a commander. He was a ghost. His eyes snapped away from the door and darted to a ventilation grate near the floor, a grate he had personally replaced 3 months ago. The main halls, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. The warriors leaned in, their disgust plain. We not go to the main halls. Kale's voice firmed. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a plan. It was a fact. Targok's mandibles clicked. Then where human? Kale pointed. Not at the grate, but at a seemingly solid dark metal panel on the far wall. A panel that looked like all the others. There, the scarred warrior who had thrown the nutrient bar actually snorted. That is a wall. Father, it's a maintenance junction, Kale snapped, his fear suddenly burning away, replaced by the cold, sharp competence of a man who owned the shadows. Service Tunnel 4 Delta. It leads to the underdecks. Follow me. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for an argument. He grabbed Zyla's small hand. Stay with me. Do not let go. He ran to the panel, hit a small, almost invisible seam with the heel of his hand. A recessed handle popped open. He wrenched it. With a hiss of pressurized gas, the wall opened, revealing a cramped, greasy, dark hole. The smell hit the warriors first. Rancid grease. Ozone. Unfiltered air. This is... One warrior growled. A waste chute. It's a way out. Kale shot back, already halfway inside. He pulled Zyla in after him. He looked back at the 10 stunned, armored giants. They'll be at your door in 30 seconds. They'll expect a fight in the hall. They'll never expect this. Your command is to live. Now move. For a second, Kale thought they would refuse, that their pride was stronger than their oath. Then Targok roared, In, you fools! Seal the junction. The next few minutes were a nightmare of scraping, clanging, and cursed oaths. The tunnel was built for maintenance drones and human-sized porters, not 8-foot titans in full battle plate. They were hunched double. Their armor scraped the low ceiling, showering them in rust and filth. This is unclean, one muttered. He leads us through filth, said another. Kale, moving 20 feet ahead, didn't hear them. He was in his world. He moved with a speed and silence that was unnatural. He didn't need a light. He knew every turn, every dip, every loose wire. He stopped. He put a hand out, and the whole column of grumbling, clanking warriors froze. Kale put a finger to his lips. He pointed up. Clang, clang, clang. The sound was faint. The heavy, rhythmic stomp of purifier boots, marching on the Durasteel deck plates, directly over their heads. They were in the main hall. The exact place the warriors would have made their stand. The exact place they would have been slaughtered. Targok was at the back. He looked at Kale's small, filth-covered back. The disgust on his face hadn't faded, but it was now mixed with something new, something he couldn't name. The human ghost had just saved their lives. They were safe. For now, the maintenance hub was a forgotten relic, a circular room full of dead diagnostic equipment and the smell of rust. Kale had sealed the tunnel behind them, his knowledge of the ancient mechanisms absolute. Now there was nothing but the drip, drip, drip of leaky coolant from the ceiling and the low, furious breathing of 10 warriors. Clan Vrak was a coiled spring of hatred. Their armor, once a source of pride, was now smeared with grease and filth. They were titans forced to crawl, warriors forced to hide. They weren't just unclean, they were diminished. And it was all Kale's fault. Kale sat with his back to a cold console, trying to make himself small. Zyla sat a few feet away, her knees drawn to her chest. The underdeck was cold. The station's life support barely reached the forgotten places. Kale, despite his adrenaline, was shivering. But Zyla was vibrating. Her small, armored hands were shaking, and her mandibles were clicking in a rapid, chattering rhythm. She was freezing. He watched her for a long moment. The clan watched him. This was a test. Every second was a test. Softskin. The word echoed in his head. Kale's jaw tightened. He was a softskin, and he was cold, which meant she must be in agony. He stood up. The warriors tensed. He ignored them. He walked over to Zyla and began to unzip his own stained, gray porter's jacket. "What are you doing?" Targok's voice was a threat. "She's cold," Kale said, not looking at him. "She is Korvash. We endure." "She's a child," Kale snapped, his voice echoing in the small metal room. He pulled the jacket off. The cold hit his back immediately, a shock of icy air on his sweat-dampened shirt. He knelt in front of Zyla. "Here," he said, his voice softer now. She just stared at him, her black eyes wide. He didn't wait. He wrapped the jacket, a human, unclean thing, around her small, shivering shoulders. It was a stupid, pointless gesture. The jacket was thin. It wouldn't stop this cold. But as his hands brushed her shoulders and she looked up at him, it happened. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a voice. It was a wave of pure, unfiltered, overwhelming warmth. It was gratitude. It was safety. It was a feeling of, I am seen. It poured off her, into him, a silent, psychic song. It filled the hollow, lonely places inside him. It was the first real connection he'd felt in 10 years. This was the taint. This light. He was so lost in the feeling that he didn't see Targok move, step away from her. The growl was so low, so full of revulsion, that Kale flinched. He looked up. Targok was standing over them, his face a mask of absolute horror. He wasn't looking at Kale in anger. He was looking at him in disgust, like a man watching a disease spread. "She taints you," Targok whispered, recoiling. "The plague. It jumps." The other warriors scrambled to their feet, their halberds now pointed not at the door, but at Kale. Kale stood slowly. He put himself between Targok and the child who was now wrapped in his jacket. "I said, she's a child." Kale's voice was shaking, but not from fear, from a new, cold fury. "There is no plague. She's just scared." "You are weak," Targok spat. "You are soft, and you are blind. You have infected us all with your human filth." A rift, sharp and deep, had just split the room. It was no longer Clan Vrak against the Purifiers. It was Kale and Zyla, and the 10 warriors who now saw him as a willing host for the one thing they feared more than death, the taint of connection. Kale met Targok's eyes. "We'll be hunted by the Purifiers, or we'll be hunted by you. What's the difference?" Targok's mandibles flared. The cliffhanger wasn't whether the Purifiers would find him. It was whether his own clan would kill him first. High Purifier Thrax stood in the plaza where the heresy had begun. His black chrome armor was immaculate, a stark contrast to the station's dull, gray utility. He was a being of absolute cold steel certainty. This was not a war. This was cleansing. An infection had been found, and he was a surgeon's blade. He was waiting. His purifiers had sealed the Vrak clan quarters. They had found the maintenance junction, its seals smoking from their plasma cutters. They had reported, with grim satisfaction, that the Anathema clan had fled into the filth chutes. "They have chosen their disgrace," Thrax had announced to his cohort, his voice resonant. "They flee like vermin. Let them die in the dark." He expected a report of a firefight, a glorious, doomed last stand from Targok, whom he'd always known was too prideful. He expected a thud of bodies hitting the Durasteel floor. Instead, he got silence. A scout captain, his armor scuffed, finally returned. He knelt before Thrax, a sign of fealty. "High Purifier, the underdecks are empty. We have swept quadrants 4 Delta and 5 Beta. There is no sign of them." Thrax's mandibles clicked. 10 8-foot warriors in full battle plate do not simply vanish, Captain. Did you find their tracks? That is the problem, High Purifier. The captain hesitated. A dangerous act in Thrax's presence. The filth, it is too thick. But the tunnels, they are a maze. A web. Unmapped. They are gone. Gone. The word was an impossibility. An insult. Targok, Thrax growled, is a warrior. He would not crawl. He would not hide. He would fight. He turned to his tech adept. Show me the station schematics. The original Porter-level schematics. The adept, sensing the cold fury in his master's voice, brought up a flickering, three-dimensional map. It was a spiderweb of blue lines beneath the main station, a web that Thrax had never, in his entire life, bothered to look at. This is madness, a warrior muttered. No Corvash could navigate this. Thrax stared, his black eyes narrowing. He saw the web. He saw the logic. This wasn't a warrior's map. This was a rat's map. And his mind finally made the connection. The human, the soft skin, the cargo hauler, the ghost, the vermin. He had not factored in the human. He had seen him as a symbol, a disease, a weak-willed hostage that Targok was foolishly, stubbornly protecting. His blood ran cold with a new, furious realization. He's not a hostage, Thrax whispered, the words a blade of ice. His cohort turned. High Purifier. Thrax slammed his gauntlet fist into the terminal, shattering the holographic map. He's a guide. The roar of sudden, absolute understanding echoed across the plaza. It all made sense. The humiliation, the speed, the impossibility. Targok wasn't leading this. The human was. The heretic was not a passenger. He was a pilot. The soft skin. Thrax snarled, the insult now a word of hate. He is using the station's shadows. He knows the walls like a roach. He has lived his whole life in the filth we ignore. This changed everything. He was not hunting 10 proud, stupid warriors. He was hunting one, small, clever animal, and he knew how to hunt animals. He has one weakness. Thrax roared, his mind now racing, formulating a new, brutal plan. A roach always runs for its nest, a place it knows, a place of safety. The cargo bays, the human's home. Lock. IT. Down. Thrax bellowed, his voice carrying over the station vox in a way that made Kale. 3 decks below, freeze. Seal the underdecks. All of them. Lock every cargo bay. I want every bulkhead, every blast door, every ventilation shaft sealed now. Thrax turned to his warriors, his eyes burning with a zealot's fire, now focused. We don't hunt the roach. We flush it. We fill the walls with fire and steel, and we force it into the light. This was it. Kale's fear was still a cold knot in his stomach, but it was now threaded with something else. A sharp, humming confidence. He knew this place. He owned this place. The air smelled different here. It was a vast, open-air scent of ionized shielding cold steel and a faint, sweet tang of imported Zarthian spices. The main cargo bay. His home. This way, he whispered, his voice no longer shaking. He pulled Xyla through the final narrow access duct. The 10 warriors of Clan Vrak followed, their armor scraping, their grumbling disgust now a familiar background noise. Where have you led us now, father? Targok's voice was a low rumble. To another trash heap? To safety, Kale said, pointing. They were on a high gantry, looking down. Below them lay a metal canyon, a 3-mile-long chasm filled with shipping containers, robotic cranes, and 1,000 places to hide. This is my world. Thrax can seal the tunnels, but he can't seal this. There are 100 ships, 100 ways out. He was breathing again. He was in control. He led them down a rattling catwalk, his feet finding sure holds in the dark. He was already planning 3 steps ahead. Container Row 3 Alpha, a smuggler's bolt hole he knew, then the freighter, the lucky guess. He was so focused on the exit, he didn't hear the trap. It started not as a sound, but as a vibration, a low, powerful thrum in the deck plates beneath his feet. Clang. HSSSSSSSS. A sound like a giant's tomb ceiling. Kale froze. He looked left. The massive, moon-sized blast door, the one that opened a void of space. Its multi-ton locking bolts had just slammed into place. What was that? A warrior snarled. Clang, 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 all around them, from every direction. The sound of a dozen other cargo bay bulkheads. Ceiling. Kale's confidence evaporated, replaced by a cold, hollowing dread. He locked us in, Kale whispered, his eyes darting. No, that's impossible. No one has that level of override except the station master. He does when he declares a purge. Targok's voice was different. The sarcasm was gone. The contempt was gone. All that was left was a flat, dead calm of a warrior who knows what the last 5 minutes of his life looked like. And then the lights came on. Not the dim blue utility lights of the cargo bay, but the blinding, white-hot, judgmental spotlights from the high watchtowers. They snapped on, one after another, illuminating the entire bay like a high-security prison yard. Kale's 1,000 places to hide vanished. There were no shadows. Look, a warrior whispered, pointing his halberd. On the gantry opposite them, 100 yards away, a figure in black chrome armor stepped into the light. High Purifier Thrax. He wasn't holding a weapon. He just watched. Then more figures. On the gantries above them, lining the catwalks below them, at the end of the canyon, blocking the path to the ships. Purifiers. Dozens. Hundreds. All in perfect, silent, tactical formation. They hadn't been hunting. They had been waiting. Kale's blood turned to ice. Thrax's voice echoed in his memory. Flushed him out. He hadn't been flushed out. He had been herded. Thrax had known, from the second he'd hit the underdecks, exactly where the human roach would run. He'd been funneled, like a rat in a maze, straight to this single, perfect, pre-prepared kill zone. All Kale's brilliant moves, his porter's gambits, they had all just been him walking deeper into the trap. Xyla's hand tightened in his, her small body trembling. Kale turned, his face ashen, to look at his clan. Targok was not looking at the purifiers. He was looking at Kale. The giant warrior took one slow, deliberate step. The fury on his face was so pure, so cold, it was a physical force. It was the fury of a warrior king betrayed. Your shadows have failed, human. Targok's voice wasn't a roar. It was a low, venomous final sentence. You have led us to our deaths. The trap was sprung. The metal canyon was a tomb, and the harsh, sterile lights were the only stars. High Purifier Thrax stepped onto the central platform, 100 yards away. He moved with the unhurried, reptilian grace of a creature that has never known defeat. He was not a warrior. He was an inevitability. Targok. His voice boomed over the bay's internal vox, a sound of cold, polished granite. You are a legend. Do not let your end be this filth. He began to walk, his black chrome armor drinking the light. Flanking him, 2 purifiers mirrored his steps, their halberds humming. Your clan is tainted, Thrax declared, his voice a sermon. Your honor is broken, but the sacred law offers one final path to cleansing. Targok and his 10 warriors had formed a tight circle, their backs to Kale and Xyla. They were a small, doomed island of bronze and steel in a sea of enemies. Their halberds were raised, their faces set in the grim, Corvash mask of a glorious death. They were ready to die, hating the reason why. A final chance, Targok, Thrax said, stopping 20 yards away. His 20 blades shinged out from his gauntlet, the energy a hungry white-blue. Give us the taint. Give us the heretic. He pointed one of those blades directly at Kale. And your clan may be cleansed. Kale's heart was a drum, his blood an icy slush. He looked at Targok's back, a wall of scarred, bronze-plated muscle. He was going to die. They were all going to die because a rigid, ancient law said they had to. You see, human? Thrax's voice was softer now, conversational, and 1,000 times more terrifying. He was toying with him. You, who are nothing, have brought down everything. He took a step closer. Your empathy will be your end. It is the plague of weakness. It is the rot that felled our ancestors. Rot, plague, weakness. Kale was holding Xyla's small, trembling hand. He felt her fear. He felt her connection. And as Thrax's words echoed in the bay, a switch flipped in Kale's mind. It was not a strategic thought. It was a revelation. Why do they fear this? He thought, his panic momentarily eclipsed by a sudden electric clarity. Why are they so terrified of feeling? He looked at Targok, at the rigid spine, the warrior ready to die for an oath he despised. He looked at Thrax, a man willing to kill his own people to stop a sensation. And Kale saw it. It wasn't a plague. It was chaos. Empathy doesn't follow orders. Empathy creates connection. It creates loyalty. It makes a warrior question the law. And to a society built on a granted certainty of honor and oaths, a warrior who questions is a vulnerability. Thrax was right. Empathy was a weakness to their system. But what if Kale didn't use their system? Targok. Kale's voice was a desperate, cracking whisper. Silence, human. Targok growled. Prepare for your end. No. Kale shouted, his human voice, thin and terrified, ringing in the vast metal space. Every warrior, purifier, and Vrak alike froze. Kale stepped out from behind Targok's back, pulling Xyla with him. He was shaking from head to toe. He was a porter in a torn jumpsuit. He was nothing, and he was done being nothing. He looked at Targok, not at the clan lord, not at the warrior. He looked at the man he had seen recoil in disgust, the man he had seen hate him. Targok, your oath is to me. Kale yelled, his voice echoing. The law says you must obey me. The law says I am clan father. Targok turned his head slowly, his eyes a furnace of pure murderous rage. You dare speak of law, boy? You have doomed us. Yes. Kale screamed, right in his face, tears of terror and fury streaming down his cheeks. And your oath is to me. So here is my command. He pointed a shaking finger, not at Thrax, but at Targok. My command is, choose. Silence, not the tense, humming silence from before. This was a vacuum, a breathless, stunned void in the universe. Kale's single impossible word, choose, hung in the sterile, floodlit air like a crack in reality. The hundreds of purifiers froze. The 10 warriors of Clan Vrak stared. In the entire history of the Corran, the sacred law, there was no precedent for this. An oath was an iron cage. You obeyed or you died. You were never, ever offered a choice. High Purifier Thrax's mandibles clicked in a dry, scraping sound of pure disgust. Madness, he hissed. The human's plague has rotted your mind. Targok. He gives you a new command, then obey him. Die for his heresy, or kill him now and be cleansed. Thrax was offering an out. Kill Kale. The blood price would be paid. The oath would be fulfilled. Targok would be free. It was a logical warrior solution. Kale's blood ran cold. He had just handed Thrax the weapon to kill him, but Targok didn't move. His massive, helmeted head was turned, his gaze locked on Kale. The human was trembling, his face pale, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it was almost pure. He was a nothing, a soft skin, a porter, and yet he had not commanded Targok to fight. He had not commanded Targok to die for me. He had not commanded Targok to protect her. He had looked at an 8-foot, bronze-armored killer, a being who hated him, and he had given him back his will. He had given him the one thing Thrax and the purifiers had taken away, the choice. In that one, terrifying, human word, Targok saw it all. He saw the weakness that Thrax feared. He saw the plague that Kale carried. It wasn't rot. It was freedom. Targok turned his head from Kale. He looked at Xyla, the tainted child, who was watching him not with fear, but with a sad, knowing understanding. Then he turned his gaze, heavy and final, to High Purifier Thrax. He roared. It was not a scream of duty. It was not a warrior's battle cry. It was a raw, volcanic explosion of will, a sound of a chain shattering. The Vrak blood, he bellowed, his voice so loud it cracked the air, is OURS. He didn't wait for Kale's command. He didn't wait for Thrax's response. He chose. Targok charged, and the 10 warriors of Clan Vrak, who had been ready to die in shame, now roar with their clan lord. They charged not for an oath, not for a human, but for themselves, for their clan. They were a bronze and steel avalanche, and they hit the shock purifier line with the force of a supernova. The battle was not a battle. It was a storm. The purifiers were warriors of order. Clan Vrak, unleashed, were a force of pure, primal chaos. Kale grabbed Xyla, diving behind a cargo container, as the air filled with the shriek of energy halberds and percussive thud of armor. It was over in minutes. The purifiers, for all their numbers, had been broken by the sheer, unexpected ferocity of warriors with a cause. The cargo bay fell silent, a new silence, filled with the hum of dying blades. Thrax was on his knees, his 20 blades shattered, his armor breached. Targok had a halberd at his throat. Kale slowly, cautiously, stepped out, his heart hammering. Targok saw him. He finished binding the high purifier, and then he approached Kale. The giant warrior, his armor steaming, strode across the deck. He was an avalanche in motion. Kale flinched, but held his ground. Targok stopped, towering over him. He did not kneel. He was not a slave. He simply looked at Kale. He looked at the torn jumpsuit, the shaking hands, the undeniable, pathetic humanity. Then he raised one massive, gauntlet hand. Kale braced for a blow. The hand settled on Kale's shoulder, heavy as stone but not violent. It was firm. You fight with no armor, Kale Vrak. Targok's voice rumbled, low and raw. That is not soft. It was. Kale realized the highest compliment a Korvash could give. A small form bumped against his leg. He looked down. Xyla wasn't trembling. She wasn't watching. She just hugged his leg, her small arms wrapped as tightly as they could, and Kale felt it. That taint, that plague. It flooded up from her, a wave of pure, overwhelming gratitude. Safety. Home. The hollow, aching wound of loneliness that had defined Kale's entire life, for the first time, began to heal. The High Council chamber was a place of stone, echoes, and power. It was designed to make mortals feel small. And Kale was small. He stood in the center of the vast, circular hall, still in his torn, blood-stained porter's jumpsuit. He was flanked by Targok, who stood not as a jailer, but as a witness. At the far end of the hall, High Purifier Thrax knelt in chains, his head bowed. Before him, on thrones of dark, carved granite, sat the High Lords of the Korvash. Kale Vrak. The Central Lord's voice was like mountains grinding. You have broken our most sacred law, and, in doing so, you have upheld our most ancient one. Explain yourself. Kale's throat was dry, his heart a frantic bird. He was no orator. He was no politician. He was just a man who had been invisible. He looked at Xyla, who stood by Targok's huge, armored boot, watching. He took a breath. My lords. His voice was small, but it didn't shake. You call her tainted. You call empathy a plague. For my entire life, I lived in a world without it. I was a soft skin, a ghost. I knew what it was to be unseen. He turned his gaze to Thrax. You fear what you don't understand. You fear that this connection will make you soft. But I have seen your strongest warriors, bound by an oath they despised, and they were weaker for it. He looked back at the council. My command made Targok free, and his choice made him strong. You don't fear a plague. You fear a choice. He motioned to Xyla. She is not your past. She is not your fall. She is your future. Silence. Thick. Heavy. The High Lord stared at Kale for a long, unbearable moment. Then he looked at Thrax. The purifier is tainted, the Lord declared. By zealotry. Break him. He then looked at Kale. The honor code is abolished. Weeks later, Starbash and Vrak felt different. The air was still thick with the metallic tang of a warrior species, but the tension was gone. Kale walked through the main plaza, the same one where he had been shoved aside, the same one where Xyla had been sentenced. He was headed to his old job. He liked the work. He paused. There, on the central pillar of the station, where a list of battle honors had once been, a new massive carving was being finished. It was not a carving of a battle. It was not a list of names. It was a giant, gauntlet Corvash hand, its claws open, clasping a much smaller, scarred human hand. It wasn't a symbol of victory. It wasn't a symbol of ownership. It was a symbol of balance. The blood price, etched in stone for all to see. A new law for a new age. Kale felt a smile touch his lips. It is strange. Kale turned. A Corvash warrior, one Kale didn't know, was standing there. His armor was off. He was in a simple utility suit. He, too, was looking at the carving. The warrior turned, his dark, reptilian eyes meeting Kale's. He nodded. It was not a salute. It was not a bow. It was a simple, profound nod of respect. Kale nodded back. And just like that, Kale, the ghost of the station, was no longer invisible. He felt a small hand slip into his. He looked down at Zyla. She was smiling up at him, and Kale felt that old, hollow wound inside him finally heal. He had a home. But as they turned to leave, Kale noticed Zyla wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the warrior, who had just nodded. The warrior was walking away, scratching his neck. "What is it, XY?" Kale asked, squeezing her hand. Zyla tilted her head, her tainted eyes looking distant. "He's happy," she said, her voice a quiet, musical whisper. "But he's also worried." Kale chuckled. "Worried? About what?" Zyla's gaze was locked on the warrior's back. "He is afraid his clan lord will not approve of his new mate." Kale froze. His blood ran cold. He stopped walking. "XY, what?" He knelt in the middle of the plaza. "What did you say?" Zyla turned to look at him. Her eyes had always been sad and knowing. But now, for the first time, they looked ancient. She wasn't just feeling the warrior's emotions. She was hearing his thoughts. "Kale, father?" she asked, her voice small again, as if sensing his sudden fear. "Why are they all so loud?"